Hey there, Patriots. Welcome back to the front lines. Death Watch here to give you guys more intel so you can update your personal armory and fight back against the fake news media machine. And today we'll be discussing this new California bill passed, Assembly Bill 957, in which they are now considering in the realm of divorce court in child custody battles. They are now giving judges the discretion to choose whether or not a parent is suitable for, in most cases, joint custody or custody in general for a child based on whether or not the parent affirms the child's sexual orientation or not, right? Or gender or sexual orientation, right? And so, looking at this video from the Daily Signal here, go and scroll on down. Great Price, openly posts this about 957, in which one of the representatives who wrote the bill, Lori Wilson, openly states exactly what her intention is for this bill.
Note that parents affirm their children. They have since the dawn of time. Typically, it happens when their gender identity expression matches their biological gender. But what happens is when it doesn't, that's when the affirmation starts to wane. And that's what we're dealing with here. Although it's called the TGI bill, they're not mentioned anywhere in the law. What's mentioned in the law is the child's gender identity and expression and the parent's affirmation of that, whatever it is, because that is our duty as parents to affirm our children.
Right. So it's not up to whether or not the parent believes their child is trans or the gender of their child. Right. It is essentially, is the parent affirming or agreeing with the gender that the child has dictated that they are. Right. And that essentially what is being considered in these child custody battles. And I'm going to show you guys, outside of the actual law right here that we have right here from the California legislation information, right? Because we don't just read headlines here, we actually read the laws. And they say right here, right, in making a determination of the best interest of the child in a proceeding described in section 3021, the court shall, among any other factors it finds relevant and consistent with section 3020, consider all of the following. One, the health, safety, and welfare of the child. Right, as used in this paragraph, the health, safety, and welfare of the child includes, among other comprehensive factors, a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity or gender expression. Affirmation includes a range of actions and will be unique for each child, but in every case must promote the child's overall health and well being. So they are considering whether or not, as a parent, you agree with your child's identity or gender identity or gender expression as a form of well-being and overall health of your child. So if you disagree with that, well then they'll rule that you are not in agreement with, you are not looking for the best interest in the health and well-being of your child, right? And we're going to get into it in a minute, how that is actually going to play out, right? Because we already have some court cases that have from years ago kind of determining the, why this law was passed in the first place. So on Friday, California Assembly voted to pass a Assembly Bill 957, a bill that would take into consideration a parent's affirmation of a child's gender identity when making custody rulings. The bill passed in the Assembly 57 to 16 after being amended in the Senate. The bill now heads to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk for his signature, right? The bill, which was introduced by the Assembly member Lori Wilson alongside its Senate bill by Scott Wiener, right, was amended by the Senate most recently, August 17, 2023. The bill will amend the state's family code to read that in making custody determinations, the health, safety, and welfare of the child will be taken into consideration. This includes a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity and gender expression, right? So how is this actually going to play out, right? Well, here's the story from the New York Post that came out February 26th of 2022, right? How a dad lost custody of a son after questioning his son's transgender identity, right? So in August 2019, Ted Hadaku, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ted here, Ted's wife Christine walked into his home office with two announcements. She was leaving Ted, and their 15-year-old son Drew was transgender. Right, Ted, a Bay Area father of two and software engineer at Apple, was then preoccupied with a grueling work project. He hadn't slept well in weeks and says he begged to have this conversation after he had gotten some rest. But Christine walked out, taking the kids to stay with her at a neighbor's house. Ted was deeply skeptical that the boy he coached into Little League was actually a young man, a young woman. But he tried to keep an open mind. Nevertheless, Ted was adamant that he did not want Drew to begin medical transition. Ted delved into the research on medical transition and gender dysphoria, right? He learned that puberty blockers could impair cognition and diminish bone density. If given puberty blockers along with estrogen, Drew could become permanently infertile. Ted wasn't even sure his son had gender dysphoria. The judge who handled the divorce saw things differently. California Superior Court Judge Joni Hiramoto grilled Ted on whether he believed that being transgender was a sin. He didn't. Whether he preferred that Drew's transgender identity was a phase, whether Ted will continue to love Drew even if his son deemed himself to be the Queen of England. The judge then granted Christine sole legal custody of Drew on a temporary basis and approved a shared legal physical custody arrangement of their younger son. She assured Ted that her decision was not yet permanent and ordered the appointment of a minors counsel to investigate how Drew was faring and represent Drew's interests. Within just a few months, Hiramoto would strip Ted of his parental rights. Ted lost the right to see or speak to Drew. Ted also lost the power to stop a medical transition already planned by the gender doctors at UCSF, Beanoff Child and Adolescent Gender Clinic. Right. So Judge Hiramoto here never disclosed to the parties that she is a mother to a transgender child herself, whose transition she publicly supported on social media. Under ethical standards for judges, she almost certainly should have disclosed this, but even had she rescued herself, it might not have been have changed the outcome. Gender activists now regularly provide training to family court judges in many states, touting the perpetuated. I think that's what that word is supposed to be. Purported? No. Touting the purported benefits of gender medicine for kids. Excuse me, sorry. I can't read for some reason. Gender medicine for kids with little discussion of the risks or the existence of prominent critics within the medical community, right? And so essentially here, right, this is exactly how it's going to play out, right? Same as it played out with this guy who's more famous in the conservative space, Jeffrey Younger, right, who was known because mainly because he's been all over the conservative spaces talking about how when his wife divorced him, taking their two twin sons, the 7-year old son, one of the 7-year old sons that he had, all of a sudden was being dressed up as a girl, right? And the mother was trying to get the child, cross sex hormones. And he tried to plead with the jury to then strip full custody from the mother and give him full custody of the kids, in which the jury was like, no, we're not going to do that, right? This is one of the main reasons why, people like Greg Abbott and many conservatives have been touting, saying that, hey, gender affirming care for children should be seen as child abuse and we need to push laws, right? However, in California and other blue states, they are trying to push themselves as being sanctuary states for trans use, right? So, how is this going to play out in the future, right? If you are a spouse who lives in a red state and you're trying to divorce your husband, right? Because in most of these cases, it kind of is in most of these family court issue cases is 99% of the time women are going to get the kids, right? And when you look at all these like drag story hours, drag queen, family friendly drag queen shows and all this other crap, right? When you look at the audience, it's mainly women who are taking their kids to these types of events, right? It's very weird. It's very odd. It's not surprising in any way. But when you actually pay attention to the people in the audience who are attending these like parties, who are attending these places, right, it's very much women and they're very cucked men, cucked husbands, right, who make up a few number of the audience, right? But mainly it is a huge amount of women and their children attending these types of events and stuff like that, right? So really no surprising that in most of these cases it's always women divorcing their husbands, and then all of a sudden the husbands figure out that, hey, all of a sudden my son is now trans or non-binary, or they're trying to get these kids to do some type of puberty blockers, right? And so when it comes to this whole situation of the sanctuary cities, right? This article goes over like the critics in the medical community who says otherwise, right? We talked about this before because in Europe is overtly saying, hey, we're going to restrict trans healthcare for minors because we are seeing adverse effects, right? Because in these countries, they have been doing the gender affirming care much longer than America has. And when it comes to the long term effects, they are starting to see other things popping up. They're starting to see that the situations that these people are ending up in is not going away. Okay. And in one of these scrolling down here, right, they say here in Finland, specialized adolescent psychiatric gender identity teams have been available for minors at two university hospitals since 2011, drew the country's adoption of the so-called Dutch approach, which in part holds that adolescents experiencing gender dysphoria can be considered eligible for puberty suppression and subsequent cross-sex hormones when they reach the age of 16. But after years of additional research, public health body in Finland recommended that minors experiencing gender dysphoria first be provided with psychological support, and if further medical treatment is pursued, that the patient be made aware of the risks associated with them. Right? In 2022, the Swedish government's National Board of Health and Welfare said hormone treatment for minors should be provided within a research context and offered only in exceptional cases, while adding that the risk of puberty suppressant treatment and gender affirming hormonal treatment currently outweigh the possible benefits, right? In Norway, the country's healthcare investigation board recommended in part that gender affirming care treatments such as puberty blockers be defined as experimental. Meanwhile, in France, the Académie nationale de médecine in February 2022 recommended the greatest reserve when considering puberty blockers or hormone treatment due to possible side effects such as impact on growth, bone weakening, risk of infertility, and others, according to a translation, right? So overtly, these leftists love to say that, well, Europe has better healthcare than us. Well, guess what? The healthcare professionals in Europe are starting to are pressing the brakes on the whole gender affirming care for minors. However, the left in America are just completely ignoring all that, all this crap. Okay, they're just saying, nope, this is not happening. We're going to push on with the whole encouraging kids to experiment with their sexualities, experiment with their gender identities, and then try to hide that fact from their parents, and then try to push them to then try to get gender affirming care, right? And in California and all these other blue sanctuary states, they're now trying to push laws that says, hey, if you don't affirm, right, meaning that if you don't accept your child's brand new identity that they most likely did not get from you, they got it from their school teacher who indoctrinated them, or they got it from social media, right? If you do not affirm your child's gender identity, well, then guess what? That can be used against you in a custody battle when it comes to the court systems, right? And not only will you just not have will you not have joint custody of your children, right? You will be completely removed from your child's life because you will be deemed and considered not beneficial to the overall health and well-being of your child, right? And they leave it up to the judge's discretion for cases specifically like this, like with Judge Joni Hiramoto, who happened to also have a transgender child. So, of course, this judge is going to rule against you because you don't care, because you don't believe in all this nonsense, right? Because, again, if you're an objective person, you would be looking at these studies In Europe, coming out of Europe, again, they have been at this game a lot longer than America. They are saying, hey, there's other things that we need to consider. They're releasing other research, academic journals talking about this crap. In America, however, we're just ignoring all this data, all this information, and going full steam ahead with the gender affirming care in blue states. However, in red states, Republicans are looking at these laws. They're looking at these studies. They're looking at this these new policies and saying that we're not doing this. We're not going to allow people to take their kids to these doctors and get all these drugs because Europe is saying that hey, this is not a good long term effect. They're rethinking, reevaluating how they're doing this crap. We should be looking to Europe on this case, right? It's just insanity. But the broader picture in Europe is not all negative from the perspective of those in favor of trans rights. Russell says, and there are plenty of examples of trans viewed positively by advocates. They say that more than 60% of total population of the European Union, including countries as Belgium, Germany, Italy, and Netherlands, have clear policies in place about offering transition-related care to minors, such as puberty blockers and hormone treatments. In addition to recently updated trans rights map, right? So overall, like in Europe, there's like constant back and forth here, constant back and forth, constant rewriting of consensus. People looking into the long-term effects. So really, overall, in Europe, it's up in the air. People are seeing adverse effects and they're over just saying that hey, if we do go with this, you need to make sure that the people that you are engaging in know full and well that this is really experimental, that these drugs are you'll have major side effects that will impact your child's health in the in the overall health or the kind of because we all know what puberty is, right? At the end of the day, we all know what puberty is. We all know that it's a beneficial part of, of growing up. It's a natural biological function that needs to happen in the human body for you to grow up, right? To give your child puberty blockers is to stunt that growth. And then to give them cross-sex hormones that are not found in their body, that's not naturally produced in their body, to then inject them with that stuff is clearly going to change their whole entire psychology. It's going to mess with their mental state. It's going to mess with their physical state. And there's going to be adverse effects to that. And to kind of pretend that that's not a huge risk, that's not a huge impact, right? It's bad faith. It's just straight up bad faith, okay? But again, it's just all sorts of craziness, right? And when it comes to all these other policies that leftists are trying to do, again, trying to push so-called sanctuary, trans sanctuary cities in these blue states, right? They're just overtly just pushing whatever laws that they can, and it's just getting out of hand, right? And like I said in my previous videos, there's really is no real middle ground to this. It's either you are a political activist who just disagrees with the science or just disagrees with doctors and just want to push whatever policy you believe is politically right? Because at the end of the day, these are medications and drugs that do alter the function of children. We all know what our sex organs do. We all know about biology. We all know what the purpose of our biology is for. To simply say no, we're going to give children puberty blockers and then hormones that are not found naturally in their own body, to pretend like that's not going to have a huge impact on that child's well-being, mental state, physical state. It's just bad faith. Okay. And so, to not, you have to admit that, yes, this is something that is overtly weird and crazy, and has significant impact on these young children, right? But in the world of the mind of the leftists, right, as long as we can maintain power, as long as we can continue to recruit people to our side and then encourage people to engage in these type of things, well, then we can then kind of conflate the numbers. We can conflate the numbers. That's why they push this crap in schools, right? They go in and indoctrinate these young kids who are very impressionable. They know full and well that these kids do not question authority, right? Because they will listen to these to their teachers. So they do this in order to conflate how many to recruit people, in order to conflate how many people actually agree with their policies, right? And when you talk to the people who are detransitioners, you overtly hear all the time that these people were misled. They're misled by other people, and when they officially went to doctors and got medically diagnosed, it turns out that they had other neurodivergent issues going on in their heads with them that made them feel that, hey, something isn't right with me, and they were pressured by other sources to then identify as trans, to then go through gender affirming care, and it turned out to that it wasn't right for them, right? That it still didn't fix their underlying issues until they went to the psychiatrist, and then that's when they figure out that, hey, there's actually something else going on with me, right? And in some cases, other more heinous things are happening to these people, right? Along with mainly in the self harm department, right? Where leftists overtly try to say that, well, it's because society doesn't accept these people as who they are, right? And it's like, studies are that we're looking at are definitely saying that that's not the case. It's not the fact that society isn't accepting them; it's the fact that they're not accepting themselves, and there's something else that's going on under the surface there, and they need to be properly diagnosed through a psychiatrist, a clinical psychiatrist, to figure out what is the root cause of their kind of dissociation with their bodies, right? It's as simple as that. But again, Democrats are bad faith. They're just trying to push whatever they can in order to recruit people, in order to get as many people on their side. And if it means going to young people, very impressionable young people, and encouraging them to experiment in with their sexualities, with their gender identities, in order to conflate how many people are actually on their side, they will do so in order to maintain power, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about winning. It's all about virtue signaling power, and that's not right. We need to adequately and effectively look at these laws, look at these studies, look at the science, and overtly sit down and say, we need to actually get these people who actually suffer from gender dysphoria the help that they need, and the people who are just doing it because of, like with Alice Cooper said, that a lot of these people are doing it for the trend, for the status, to simply say or virtue signal that they're a leftist, right? Because it's just the new popular thing to do, right? We need to separate the people who are actually gender dysphoric, which is an actual mental issue that these people need help with, versus all these other activists who are just tossing on the label just for political status, and then trying to encourage other people, young kids, and encouraging them and confusing them about what is going on here, right? So overall, this is just a crazy law amongst a lot of other laws that leftists are just overtly trying to push, that is going to destroy the next generation of people, because these people do not know, these kids don't know what the hell they're doing. To sit here and pretend like these kids have any knowledge of their own self identity, who they are, or what they want to be, but they can go out and decide that, hey, I'm I'm an opposite gender of what I was born as, and I want to go through the sex cross hormones or the puberty blockers. It's just insane. It's disgusting, right? But I'm gonna digress there, right? This is not about hatred towards anybody within any type of group. It's just simply that, hey, this is clear cut foul play, and this needs to be stopped, right? So I overtly agree with Fred State saying that, hey, we're going to determine this as child abuse, right? Because again, you look to the European countries, they are overtly saying that, hey, we need to slow down the the gender affirming care, and limit it to only when it's absolutely necessary. And if we do give this to minors, these cross sex hormones or the puberty blockers to minors, we need to tell them upfront that this, in some cases, this is experimental, and that there is going to be adverse side effects, and these are the side effects that will come with doing so, right? Because if you overtly tell these people this, right, which I don't believe they're telling these people. They're not. I mean, leftists overtly are just not telling people any of this crap. They're just overtly denying. They're just saying that nope, all these side effects, all these other things has nothing to do with anything, right? It's all made up, make believe that conspiracy theories that right wingers are pushing, right? But no, actual good faith doctors in other countries are overtly saying that hey, these are the side effects. People need to be overtly aware of the possible side effects of doing these types of things. Okay, as simple as that. So, like always, stay safe, stay sane, be vigilant, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you, Patriots, on the battlefield.